All right. You guys want to get a recap of how this started? Does everybody realize what this matchup is? Like, to me, this is a matchup of, you know, these guys might play a world championship match against each other one day. To me, that's what's going on here right now, is a sort of, precursor several years in the future. I mean, it's these two guys and Abdussadarov, I think, are the three that are sort of like stand out a bit. Maybe if Firouzja gets too much into fashion, he could drop out and it could be Gukesh versus Abdussadarov or something like that. But these guys are incredible. And Firouzja played quite well just now at the Bucharest event. So, he seemed not to have lost any steps from his time off. So okay, Italian game. Is Magnus getting his something kicked? I don't know, Cartier. I'm here to watch these guys. Who should I be watching? Let's see. There's a match, Caruana Carlson going on. Wesley So versus Nakamura. Abdussadarov versus Giri. Woo! And Mahmed Yara versus Tari are all being played today. Let me see. Maybe I could open up more than one game. It's classical chess, so sometimes you've got time to watch more than one. So here I could go backwards and open up Abdussadarov's game. See what he's got going against Giri. IQP. Love it. Pressure on c6. Yeah, it's an interesting position. Knight d4, rook d1, queen d4, bishop c6, bishop e5, bishop b7. Okay. I'll open up a couple more boards just in case we want them. I mean, I probably want to watch Abdussadarov. Should we watch the former world champion? Ooh, has he played the French again? It looks like he may have played the French against Fabi here. Okay, and we can have all the boards open in case there's something we want to jump on. I mean, here's Mahmed Yara of Tari. Looks like Tari's doing quite well. First blush. I guess once I've opened a board, it would be weird to close it, right? So then next thing you know, you've got every board open because everything interests you. These guys did not make a 5-move draw in the Berlin, so good for them, I guess. But I gotta say, I'm just overall very disappointed in Wesley So lately, in terms of just the lack of ambition. Just never winning any games, and not because he doesn't have the skill, but because he doesn't even care to try. So let's just forget about that and check out the guys I want to check out at first. So, Italian game. Super topical. The A pawn comes rushing forward for space. Wow. Bishop b5, and he just kept going. Wow. What a commitment so early. I mean, Bishop a4, are we already threatening to encircle the pawn, more or less, right? I think black can deal with it. My first thought is Bishop a4. There's probably Bishop d7, b5, knight a5. Huh. No, I'm not sure. You got some politics for us to check out? All right. Later reading. Sorry, folks. That's a misclick. Bishop c4 was played. So this is really weighing heavy. Maybe if he goes Bishop a4, trying to round this up. Another option is to just break in the center. d5. If you go here, then after trades here, you'll lose something. And if takes, takes. Now this pawn's under fire before you can take this one. So maybe that would have been the plan from black. It's just straight up d5 coming next. Bishop c4 played in the game. Knight e7, okay. No idea what that's about. The knights go to the king side, sure. Something they sometimes do. Okay, and then he's going to prepare c6, d5 with this knight defending here, perhaps. Bishop b3, d5. All right, so some kind of tactic if white takes on d5? Or is it just that he'll take with the knight, not the pawn? To ping c3. Yeah. Okay, the knight takes. So e5 is hanging and c3 is hanging. But I don't think white wants to give up c3 because then these two pawns effectively become isolated. So knight e5, yeah, was not played in the game. But what you see in this position here is that these pawns are both pretty bad right there. And honestly, black can land a bishop or a queen on d4 and not even retreat the knight right away. And that's going to be annoying for white, right? Like, you play queen c2 or d2 or something, and then black just plays a move like this or whatever. I mean, even with the queen. Hitting the rook, and then knight e2, queen a1, queen b4. Probably just losing for white, basically, right? So knight d5 strong. White has to defend c3, and that takes the pressure off the a-pawn for the moment. So it won't be quickly lost, but the game's still interesting. Bishop comes to e6, leaving e5 still hanging. Now it's that famous queen f6 kind of tactic. So if white took the pawn, which of course he didn't, I'm just showing some basic stuff here, then check, and white would lose back the material. So that bishop f2 move, that's the refutation. That's what's defending the e5 pawn. That's a very, very common tactic in e4, e5 openings, I think. I don't play a lot of standard Italian games with both colors. So Cartier could tell you better than me, or Cartier can correct me if I'm wrong. But I've seen that a few times. I think that comes up quite a bit as far as when you can play d5 as black, because white will often be attacking the e-pawn. In the game, white goes knight h5. It's a fine square for the knight, but it seems also like, you know, e4 and f5 were squares, and black looks pretty comfortable here. White's threatening to take the pawn by stopping queen f6. And my instinct for black would be queen d6 here. That would probably hang a piece. Okay, goodbye instinct. I'm happy with where this bishop is, so I'm wondering if there's a move other than bishop c7. I guess he always has to worry about c4, knight moves, c5. That's kind of... It may not be positionally desirable to leave this d pawn so far behind and hang the b pawn, and this may not be positionally desirable, but tactically it's a whole kerfuffle that it starts, right? Because it kicks the knight off of its square, kicks the bishop off of its square, just it opens up bishop takes e6, so it just creates a lot of drama, and you have to calculate very concretely as black, you know, what happens if white goes c4, c5. Could defend this pawn with f6, but then this is hanging. So d4 immediately is likely to be pretty loose for black. Oh, also the whole c4 thing might win. Let's see here. Here. Oh, that defends it, huh? Takes, takes, takes. That loses it. So c4 here, here. And now you lose a piece as well, right? Takes, check. And then white can take here. I don't know a lot searching for checkers, but those that I do know, I'm sharing with you as we speak. Right? Like, for example, I know that in general, it can be hard to defend the e5 pawn solidly like this without allowing something on the file. But I noticed that in this position, an unusual move is stronger than the normal move. D4 would be the normal pattern, but chess is so concrete. In this position, C4 is stronger. It wins a piece because of this C5 tactic. So F6, super off the table. Queen D6, there was C4, C5. That's another normal pattern for defending this pawn and connecting the rooks, and it also doesn't work. I also had the idea of knight F6, so that if white took, we could take and bring the queen out to a good square, and go for, you know, this kind of position. Well, what black needs to do to stabilize the e-pawn is defend it, and that's the immediate question. Is we're just looking at what are the options for defending the e-pawn, right? And it turns out there are very few. Very few. There are problems with basically everything I'm thinking of. Oh, yeah. So the real problem I had with knight f6, because I showed you guys this position here. This position isn't immediately a problem for black. It looks playable. I mean, playable for white, too, I think. Maybe with queen b3 or d4, e4 should be good for black. That was my first thought, right? But I think here black's got f5 coming. The position's good for black. You could also consider takes here. A thought as well. But maybe the simplest for white is queen b3 while the queen's defending this pawn, and the idea that if they trade, then this pawn is a little bit weak. I mean, it would be messy. It would be messy. At this point, you can sort of play rook d8 for black and go after these pawns. Maybe still playable and equal. That's the move played in the game. Yeah, you've guessed the move played in the game. And the reason I didn't mention it yet is because I'm just looking at what are alternatives to what actually happened. But the real problem I had with knight f6 was bishop takes bishop. Because if you take back here, that's a real trash pawn structure. But if you capture the knight, then I thought after bishop f5 that I liked white's position a bit with the bishop pair here. Black's light squares looking weak, right? Hard to contest that bishop. So, you know, maybe Gukesh played the only move that really was largely available here. Now, you also asked about you making use of the a-pawn. I mean, this is a very unusual feature. That's what makes this whole game stand out, is this a-pawn rush to a3 that he used here. That's the unusual feature. And, I mean, basically, it means that white's c-pawn is always hanging here and needs to be tended. And it also has implications for various endgames. It could be strong or weak in different endgames. There's a decent risk of it being lost. So, yeah, I think what black was trying to do was sort of assert themselves in the center with this nice knight and try and show that white's c3 and d3 pawns are going to be tender and sort of keep the focus on that versus on the a-pawn. I think that would be the idea. And if white could really slow down the position and lock things up, they could try to pick off the a-pawn. But it feels a little bit hard to go take something that far off to the side of the board with this many pieces on the board and not allow an attack from black. Because, you know, black can roll as well. But you'll see white totally transforms the game with this pawn break immediately. d4, knight d4. Now we're looking at this bishop sort of having nowhere to go. White's got pressure against g7, h6 as well with these pieces. And I think, you know, immediately black's under pressure as soon as white achieves this d4 break. That's part of why I was wondering, was there anything better than bishop c7 here? Because up to this point, you know, black's idea made sense, but once black backed up and white got the knight to d4, it felt like actually white must be somewhat better, right? Just a question of how much. Here he stops queen h2. Black just develops the rook, and Firouzja grabs the bishop pair here. Didn't have to right away, but this bishop's busy. Is there a good move for the queen? Queen h5, knight f4 is not good. Queen f3. White even has to calculate knight b4 carefully at all times, but is queen f3 a move? The idea with queen f3 would be maybe to play knight f5 instead of taking on e6, but I mean, taking on e6 should be good for white, so he just does it. He just does it. And now, I mean, in some cases the bishop would want to come back here, but e4 will be a great square for the knight. Is intense. We see Firouzja spent quite a bit of time on this choice to trade on e6. Queen g4 is a very likely next move, checkers, yeah. Clearing the way for this rook to come to d1, and of course looking at all the light squares. Now, in this position, we have to keep our eyes on tactical shots like knight takes c3 and knight takes b4 from white's perspective. From black's perspective, we have to keep our eyes on counter shots like rook takes e6 once the knight moves. Queen g4, of course, is going to hit e6 and g6, so it's unlikely that black will have any tactics of their own there. So queen g4 should keep black in a defensive mode for now. Feels really good for white, actually, to play queen g4 and rook ad1. Feels really like all the white pieces are in great shape. Queen g4 has just been played too. Just a fair warning / an excuse me comment. I'm going to be eating breakfast as we a little bit as we watch this. That's just how it is. I have to watch the games, and I have to eat sometimes. I don't do it very often. Nice. Good for you, Hoki. Okay, so Rangod points out that there's another tactic in the air. So let's have a quick look at rook takes f2. I mean, if you can't take back, then you've just been exploded and your knight and bishop are hanging. So basically, you have to either take it or play knight e4. That could be interesting too, right? Knight e4, hitting the queen, and then when she moves, you take this with your king and head out on a journey. Rook f8, king e2, bishop b6, king e2. Doesn't look like black really has anything there. So at the moment, knight e4 probably refutes rook f2. What about king takes, bishop check, king here? Is this okay as well? Now black's got some power on the d file waiting to cut you off, right? So then black has like knight takes c3 check, bishop takes c3, queen d3. Holy moly. All right, we better be careful about rook f2. In other words, that was a grisly fate. Funny that knight e4 seemed to resolve it for us. Oh, searching for checkers. That's not very satisfying at all. To take on e6 and let this rook rampage our second rank. Yeah, you're sort of happy that technically you didn't lose like this, but you also didn't get an advantage for white. This is not desirable for white at all. Black's looking great. King here hitting the rook. Idea is knight f4, knight e3, knight c3. Black's got a rook on the second rank. Knights hanging here. This would be like absolute damage control if we blundered rook f2 and we're like, oh shoot, I lost the game. Let me try and finagle something. But it's very interesting that king takes bishop check looks almost deathly. I mean, if you come here, knight c3 was killing more or less. maybe there'd be king f1 instead. And then rook f8. Then you can come here because the rook's not on this file anymore. But there's still knight check, bishop takes, and checkmate on the f file. Oof. Oh, you were thinking just to like do like a very strong exchange sack on the dark squares, Rango? Okay, so Rango's pointing out in this position before queen g4 was played, if white had played like a random move, sort of developing, defending, or whatever, there might be rook f2, king f2, queen g3. And that's almost something you don't need to calculate if you see the chance to do that in an opposite colored bishop kind of scenario like this. If you can just blow open your opponent's dark squares with an exchange for one pawn sacrifice, that's like the minimum sacrifice that exists in chess. You almost don't need to calculate this. You know this is very, very good for black. I actually would guess that it's completely winning. Like, here white resigns. I think it's just done. If I really wanted to be sure if it was winning for black, I would calculate. But, you know, you could play rook f2 almost just whatever. Let's just ship this move. It's going to work out. But with the queen on g4, it becomes a much more complicated trick around drawing the king out from the castle, because you take away g1 and he can't come back. You bring him out into the middle, and then you're calculating some crazy attacks down a rook, right? Let's give a shout out where shout outs are due. Mr. Hockey Chess Dude, formerly Charlie Silva. Did you change the URL of your channel somehow? Wait, let me see. What is happening? I like your new about. Oh, got you. Okay. All right, so folks, if you were following Mr. Charlie Silva, you're probably still automatically following Mr. Hockey Chess Dude, because I see that that our channel is still following him. But if you weren't following Charlie, this is the new Charlie. Okay, so interestingly, this looks really scary for white. I think king f3 is not going to be better than king f1 after rook f8. And probably white's actually dead here. If there's a good defense, I don't see it. So that means that here with rook f2, it's actually only knight e4 that's refuting this. The hilarious thing is, in the rook sack positions, black's queen is out of play on h2. That's the only reason that white survives this. Plus that the knight on e4 is a beast. Stopping checkmates on f2, holding down the bishop, giving the king something to run around. Dang. That's pretty sick how close rook f2 was to working. Thanks for bringing that move up for us, Ranga. That's that King's Indian player's instinct for, like, the dynamic, you know, hit them on our color squares kind of thing. Yeah, but we've got to move from Gukesh. Let's see what Gukesh has gone for. We didn't even really talk about what he might do other than rook f2. He's gone to a dark square with the knight loading up. If white goes somewhere random, that knight might be happy to land on d3, I could imagine. Because basically it wants to do dirty work on white's dark squares. Does rook e6 not work against rook f2? Probably not very well. I mean, it's playable. It's playable. It's playable. Maybe it's even enough to equalize, yeah. queen g3. The tempi work out better for white than in the previous version, because here black took this knight before this piece. You play here hitting this, and if black trades everything, then in this position, white's close to equal. I mean, they're still worse because there's just a rook on your second rank. So again, it's just like, why would we play for this as white, right? But it's definitely worse than 94 in the sense that 94 wins, right? In this position here, 94 just wins the game. Boom. Yeah. So in that sense, we don't need all these bailout moves. But it's very good that you've got the eye for coming up with all your candidate moves. You know, all the moves that people might overlook or not consider. Looks like Jesse's got a show planned here. He wants to do graduates on Tuesday this week. All right, boss. You can do graduates. You ready to take over if I stop it right now? You ready to hit the button? We have to coordinate our calendars pretty soon, so that the new Dojo calendar coordinates with either our Twitch calendar or my Google calendar. But okay, folks, stick around. No, calendars are not coordinated. If you scroll below ChessDojoLive here in the viewer, you can see no scheduled streams for the entire week. Is how it shows up there. And when I go to my Google calendar, I see no Dojo streams either. Just nothing. So they're not coordinated. So we have to coordinate them. So it'll be easier to know what's going on. All right, folks. Folks, I'm going to stop the stream, but don't leave, right? Because Jesse's just going to pick up the baton here. He's going to do a show called Graduates. He's going to be talking about some of the hardest working members of the Chess Dojo. If a new stream doesn't pop up for you in a couple seconds, you might just want to refresh, right? But stay around here on Twitch TV, Chess Dojo Live. Cheers. And I'll probably come back on after Graduates.